Hello there, in this video today we are looking at different forms of legislation as part of the OCR J276 GCSE Computer Science specification. The specific pieces of legislation we're looking at are the Data Protection Act, Computer Misuse Act, Copyright Designs and Patents Act, Creative Commons Licensing and the Freedom of Information Act. And we're going to kick things off by first of all looking at some learning outcomes, which we can see here, which is looking at how different pieces of legislation are used and applied and the benefits of them. And let's kick things off with the Data Protection Act. The main reason for the Data Protection Act is to keep your data safe and secure when people are holding it and when people are using it. There are 6 rules behind holding data and storing data according to the Data Protection Act, and you can see those on the screen at the moment. Although some of these rules seem quite obvious, for example, using data fairly, lawfully and transparently, data being kept for no longer than necessary, these are rules which get put into law because companies need to be held to account for how they were holding, storing and using data. Making sure people's data is secure is becoming ever so more important as time goes by, and if we're thinking about the usage of data by social media, the Data Protection Act is ridiculously important. What this Data Protection Act allows you to do is to know that your data is being held safely and securely, that your information being held on you is kept secure as well, that the information which is being held on you is necessary. With the Data Protection Act, there is particular areas which are taken into interest for more specific areas, for example, looking at questions and data concerning race, gender and sexual orientation. These areas are can be quite private and personal, and the Data Protection Act ensures that the information gathered, it doesn't get used for malicious purposes. So what I want you to do now is show your knowledge of the Data Protection Act. I want you to talk about what it's for, who it benefits, why it's needed, when it's applicable, and for bonus points, how should companies handle data? How should it be stored? How should people be gathering data? That sort of thing. And again, if we're going for the expert, we need to see paragraphs. So give the video a little pause and then we're going to move on. So up next we're looking at the Computer Misuse Act, and this really came into force in 1990 to govern the misuse of computers. You can see there the 3 statements regarding the Computer Misuse Act and what it governs, and really it's to make sure that people are using computers fairly and safely. It governs the unauthorized access to both computers and unauthorized access within the intent to commit or facilitate offences. So essentially it's saying if you're using a computer for malicious purposes or trying to get into somewhere where you shouldn't be, that's where the Computer Misuse Act comes into play. It also prevents the unauthorized modification of computer material, so maliciously changing anything which can then cause damage, disruption or deletion of data. So the Computer Misuse Act governs unauthorized access, unauthorized use, and then anything which then could be causing harm to the computer users. So activity 2, again I want you to show your knowledge of the Computer Misuse Act. You can see the questions there. We've got the bonus points question at the bottom. Why is it important for large companies? Why do they need to be able to use the Computer Misuse Act to ensure that there is some form of preventative measure to stop people from wanting to attack their networks? So give the video a quick pause and then we'll move on to the next section. So now we're going to be looking at the Copyright Designs and Patents Act. If you've ever given a copy of a piece of music or a video game to a friend, you've broken the Copyright Designs and Patents Act. If you made a copy of something and then sold it, or used software on a network without permission, or using software without permission of the copyright holder, that's breaking the Copyright Designs and Patents Act. When we're looking at it from a computer science point of view, there's different aspects to be thinking about. Looking at how, for example, musicians' music can be downloaded illegally online, looking at how video hosting companies can get around particular copyright laws to allow them to be hosting illegal movies. It's really, really important for the person who's creating the particular piece of media, whether it is a writer, whether it's an artist or a movie producer, that their work is their work and no one can copy it. So the Copyright Designs and Patents Act makes sure that the person who's created something holds the copyright, and that if anyone wants to use it, they can request permission or they can ask for use it. But if someone wants to just take something and pretend it's theirs, that's where the Copyright Designs and Patents Act protects the person who's created the original media. So we can see there's some questions for you to be looking at around the Copyright Designs and Patents Act. And again, we'd need to look at that question at the bottom. That's for bonus points. Give the video a pause and then we'll move on. Up next, we are looking at Creative Commons licensing. What this allows is for someone to be able to create something and own something, but allows other people to be using it at the same time. So if someone is going to create a help sheet or a worksheet for a teacher to use, they might release it under Creative Commons licensing. We've got the different licenses there, which I'm not going to read out, you can read that, but what it allows it to do is people to be allowed to share their resources, share what they've been created, but then there's some form of protection on it. So for example, in non-commercial, something can be shared, it can be copied if it can be modified, but no profit can be made from it. We can have got no derivative works where something can be copied, but it can't be modified. So what this allows someone to do is to create a resource, to create something, which then allows other people to use it, adapt it, and edit it, but within strict rulings. So it's handy for people who want to get their work out there and for people to use it, but still retains some form of ownership among what they've created. So again, we've got some Creative Commons licensing questions there. We've got bonus points at the bottom. Give the video a quick pause, answer the questions, and then we'll move on. Finally, we're going to be looking at the Freedom of Information Act, and what this allows is either journalists or members of the public to apply to the government to see documents, information, or other pieces of data which might be pertinent to be released. What this allows is for, if we're taking the example here of journalists, for them to express their freedom to find out particular pieces of information. Requests under the Freedom of Information Act can range from anything to any government body. If there's some form of data and it is in the public interest for that data to be released, this is where the Freedom of Information Act comes into play. If we're thinking about the computer science world and the Freedom of Information Acts, people may want to know particular information, particular statistics about how companies use their employees' data, how companies use particular pieces of software, or how companies are able to respond to different threats. So the Freedom of Information Act allows the general public to find out information from companies which is within the public interest. So last activity today, I want me to show you knowledge of the Freedom of Information Act. We've got the questions there. We've got a nice question at the end, which again, we need to see paragraphs. I hope this video has been helpful for you. I hope you're more happy with legislation, and I shall see you in another video. See you later.